Hello everyone. Today I would like to show you how I bind off. I know I already have a bind off video on YouTube, but it was a sample project. Today I would like to actually bind off a completed project I'm working on. This is a Santa suit blanket. And let's show you how to bind off a full project. Okay, I have to finish this row. It was a purl row. So I need to purl these last few pegs. And I always end with a U-knit or a U-wrap on the last peg when I'm doing borders. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you get to bind off is to go 2.5 times so that you can cut your working yarn and have enough to get you around the bind off. So when you're working on a loom and you don't really use all the pegs like I'm doing here, I hope the camera's not too shaky. I will go around, put it around that last peg, and come back to the first peg. And then go again. Let me put my yarn here. Okay, so if you can see that, let me see. Come all the way around to the last peg you were doing. And go around. That's 2 times. So I'm just going to go another little ways, and that should be enough. So about 2.5 times should get you around the loom. Okay, so then I will cut the working yarn. And I always use a Clover brand bent tip needle. They work really nice. I just squeeze the yarn around and then it goes right through the eye of the needle. And you're going to have a really long piece to work with. The farther you get, the simpler it'll get. You just need to go slow so at this point you don't ruin anything. You put all this work into your blanket or flat panel and you don't want to mess it up now, so just go slow and this will work for you. Now, first thing I want to say is if you're using the first peg and the last peg as a turning peg, like I am here, and I do that to get this nice chain cast on down the edges. The first thing I want you to do is move this loop to the peg before, snug it up, and bind it off. Okay? I also want you to do it with the other side. This was a turning peg, so I'm going to move the loop over and knit it off. Now, if you're using garter stitch all the way and you are not skipping your knitting and purling every peg, then you do not need to move those. Only if you're using this peg only as a turning peg. Okay. So now the first thing we want to do is take your needle. Can't pick it up this morning. I want you to we're going to kind of lay the yarn in front of the first one. And we're going to bring the needle up through the second one. And then just, like I said, your yarn will be long. Just go slow until it gets more manageable. When you pull it up like this, because you sort of laid it in front and went to the second, that makes like 2 loops on this peg. That's what you want. So just kind of, snug. You don't really have to worry about tension so much on this bind off. You will put your needle down through both loops on the peg and pull it. Like I said, just go slow. Keep your yarn from tangling up. Just use both of your hands, just like that. you will kind of snug. And then we'll skip this peg that it's again, so it makes 2 loops. We'll skip this peg. We'll come up through this peg. Always keep your working yarn in front of the loom. Don't let any of the loops go to the back of the pegs. Okay, so you'll come down through both loops on this peg. Now, if you're using the whole entire loom, like I do for most of my blankets, this yarn that you're working here with a needle will be even twice as long. But if you go slow and you try to use both hands to kind of keep the yarn from tangling up, it will work. And then you come back down through the 2 loops you created. What those 2 loops are actually doing is giving you the same chain stitch look. When you take these off as 2 loops, it'll actually look just like your chain stitch. You can kind of see that. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. Now, each time we go down through, it makes like a little, I'm not sure that the camera can focus, but there's a little hump like here. And that is exactly what you want, because that shows you where you've been. You've already came down through here. When you come down through, it makes that little loop right here, which actually you can pull up. And then I'm going to snug it back down, come up through the next one. If I have to walk away from my bind off, I always let my needle just like this. Then when I come back, I know that I'm pulling it up out of this one. The tip of my needle is facing up, so that's why I'm up. Because sometimes if you're binding off a long blanket, you need to stop for whatever reason. So again, use your other hand. Keep it from knotting. Almost left it not there because I was talking and not paying attention. Okay. And make sure you can see, come down through the 2 loops. Here, I want to make sure that all the yarns stay to the front of the pegs. Like I said, just kind of snug it up there. It'll only snug so far and it gets tight. That's good. Okay, then skip this peg and go up the next peg. And down. Now this is going to take me a little bit, so feel free to speed forward until I get to the end. But for anybody who needs to watch it being done for a little bit, you can stay with me. This is how I do all my flat panel items, all my blankets. Doesn't matter what size it is, this is the same bind off I use. I never have problems with one end getting too tight. That's what I did the very first blanket I ever made. I followed another stretchy bind off video. That one you had to move loops as you were going. And because I was moving loops, my tension got all messed up. And one side was like a U instead of being straight across. I really messed that one up. I ended up ripping the whole thing out and starting over. So when I got close to the bind off, I thought, okay, I need to do some researching and find a better way. So what I did was I watched several different videos on YouTube and the internet and read some articles about binding off, and I kind of chose the bits and pieces that I liked the most that I thought would work. So I sat down and did a sample, and this was just, it was so easy. It worked. And I couldn't believe that when I took it off the loom, I thought, this is going to be too easy and it's not going to be right. But when I took it off the loom, it was straight across. it wasn't tight. And this to me can't be much easier. It's like sewing, but you're just putting the needle of the eye up through and down through. You don't have to be a sewer to figure this out. All you have to do is watch me and do the same thing. If I'm doing a short piece with maybe 3, 4, 5 pegs, you just use your hook to bring it up through and down through. That's fine. You don't have to grab a needle. These needles aren't real expensive. This is a Clover brand, but they have other brands, especially on Amazon, where you can buy a whole bunch of them. I'm not sure what the quality of those are, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't be nice. I like the Clover because it came with a nice little handy tube that I could keep them in, so I don't lose any of them. I do have a Loom knit needle cushion, and I always keep one handy in there, as well as the other couple that I have in the tube. But I've never had one break. I've been using these since 2016. Pretty much the same one. Never had anything happen to it. I just love it. And that bent tip makes it so easy to go down through these pegs. It's just amazing. I like it. I tried a straight plastic needle when I first started. That was a lot more difficult. I thought maybe it had something to do with the plastic, so I got a metal one. It was still straight and still a problem. And then I was doing some research and found a bent tip. I thought, well, that looks perfect. That'll help me to get it up through that peg groove. It goes right in the groove. So I've been using this ever since. Sometimes if you see me doing something there, I'm turning it so that the bent part of the tip, like here, I don't want to go up on, I want it to go up under. So sometimes I just bend it a little bit so it helps go up under. And especially with the two loops, because I want to make sure I grab both loops. I tug on this every time. I don't know if you see me doing it or not, but I tug on this every time to make sure that's nice and tight. That doesn't mean your bind-off's tight. Don't remove any loops until you're all done. The more loops you remove before you're done, and you're more chances of you messing up your tension, and it will not be straight. Like I said before, this works for me every time. I've never had this fail. From the very first time that I put the pieces together and thought, this can't be any easier. It's just like sewing up the ends. You know, and to give that chain look, you need to skip one so you have 2 pegs there, or 2 loops, on a peg, to give you that chain look when you go back down through. It locks those 2 together. So that your sides will be a chain stitch and both ends will be a chain stitch. I use a crochet cast on. It's also called a chain cast on. I do it the same way that Deborah Shaw does in her videos on YouTube. So if you need to know how to do a nice cast on for blankets that'll match all your ends, you can check her out. I do suggest, though, a lot of people have been using the owl eye stitch. So Deborah Shaw has her own version of this bind off as well. Just a little bit different. You can use hers, or if you use this one, just make sure that when you're done your owl eye, just do one row of U-knit or an E-wrap before you do this bind off. Because I did an owl eye and I did the bind off, and I got these tiny little holes at the end that I didn't like. So I went back and I did a sample and checked it out, which I think there is a comparison on that on the Facebook groups for Loom knitting. If you're part of them, you may have seen it, where I show what happens if you just go from owl eye right to the bind off, or if you do one row of U-knit or E-wrap if you can't do U-knit. I don't want you to do a tight U-knit, just a nice U-knit tension the whole way across. If you're not sure you can keep your tension even, then just do 1 row of E-wrap all the way across. And then do your bind off. You can bind off going either way. It doesn't matter. If you, I like to go toward my right, but if you want to go toward the left, that's fine. It won't make any difference. Need to pull out a little more yarn there. We're over halfway now. We're moving right along. Again, do not remove any loops until you're all finished binding off. If you have stitch markers on, like I do, you sort of have to work around them. If you happen to pick one up and get it sewed into your bind off, and I have had that happen, you can just use little scissors and snip them. They're just silicone. I get them from either knittingboard.com or Amazon. I needed some different colors, so I had to go to Amazon to pick up a couple different colors. Knitting Board has green and yellow and orange. I'm not sure if there's another color, but I also got red and blue from Amazon. A darker blue. KB might come with a light blue. You can check that out on knittingboard.com. Theirs comes in a nice little plastic case that you can keep them in, which is really nice. Or you can always go to like Harbor Freight or somewhere and buy a little storage box with different compartments to keep your colors. But you, like I said, you may pick them up on this bind off, so you just watch your needle. Now, if you come down on like here, I'm going up, so I'm not going to catch it. And coming down on this one, there isn't one. So you don't just need to watch. Back there, I had a couple pegs that had 2 of them on. You know, you just need to pay attention that you don't pick one up. But like I said, if you happen to pick it up, you can just snip it out with scissors. So you're just going up, then you're coming down through 2 loops. Like I said, if you need to leave for some whatever reason, just sort of tuck your needle up through, let it go. When you come back, you'll know that you're going up this loop and down through the previous loop. That's the only thing you need to remember. There's no taking the yarn around the pegs, no fancy stuff. You just don't need to do that. Make sure all your yarns stay to the front. That's very important. You don't want the yarn behind the peg. I mean, it'll still work, but it might look a little different right at that stitch if it's in the back instead of the front. Actually, I think on the first bind off video I did, one of the stitches is actually in the back, but it still looked nice when I took it off. But if at all possible, make sure you watch each loop and that you keep all your yarn to the front. It doesn't matter if your last row was a knit or a purl. It doesn't matter. My last row was a purl, and it still comes out the same look as the other side. Some people only like to end on the knit. That's fine, but it really doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is if you're using like an owl eye, which is a different type of stitch, then you need to make sure your bind off doesn't have any holes in it. And in order to do that, I like to do a row of knit stitching first. Or purl if you want. Wouldn't matter either way. Okay, we're almost done. Make sure that one slipped behind the pegs, so make sure it stays in the front. I got a little faster here on the second half because your yarn gets a little shorter and it's not as many chances for it to knot up. So the last half will go faster than your first half. First couple, your yarn is so long to work with. Now, when you get to the end, you went up through here and down through here, but I want you to go up through here one more time. That gets this working yarn on the back side, which is this. So it's on the back side, and you'll cut it 6-8 inches long, whatever you usually do. Okay, now let me see the other side. Okay, now, on some of my directions on my blankets, I tell you to take off every other loop. I do that because if I'm on my chair and the weight of the blanket, it just seems to help. It doesn't take any longer or shorter time. So I've just gotten into the habit of taking every other loop off. Now here on the table, the blanket's laying here on the table. The weight of the blanket is minimal because it's small. And plus it's laying on the table. It's not pooling. But like I said, if you're on a chair and you're taking these loops off and you take all of them off, this starts getting heavy and it starts pulling on these loops. I really don't like that stretchy. Sometimes it stretched out a loop or so. I didn't like that. So just to be on the safe side, I do every other loop. Then I go back and take off every other one and making sure that the weight of your blanket is not pooling. You know, if you have to put the blanket up on your lap or something as you're taking it off to use up some of that weight, do that. Okay, so when you get the whole way around, I'll just start here. We don't have to go back and go the other way. This one here is a little snug. It's my end one. And then just take off. Finish taking them all off. It's not pooling, but if it was, I would kind of hold it so that it doesn't pool. I don't want it to pool. Now these might look a little loose, but I'll show you what to do when we get them out. We're almost there. Hang in there. This is always the fun part when you're finally finished and you get to take it off of the loom. And one more, voila. Okay, let me set that aside. And now I just want you to take this end and I just usually snug it up. And then I like to just take the end through my hands like this. And just shape your corner. That's how easy it is. Right here's your cast off edge. It's that nice little chain. Here's your cast on edge. They're the same size. You can see, can't get it all in there, but you can see they're same size, especially after you wash it. It'll be nice square corners. Here's your two edges. They look the same. Nice chain on these edges. Nice chains on your side edges. Very beautiful. So this is the little Santa blanket that I made. Here is the back. Just need to work in all my ends. So once I weave in these ends, it'll just, all you'll see is the little dashes where I cross the yarn so that there's no gaps. The edges are done that way too. There's a little white dash that runs the whole way because your border's white and that's where you're locking it in. So when you go back to the front, everything's locked in tight. There's no seams between any of the coloring. This, I always wanted to be able to do a Santa blanket without attaching this belt buckle separate. I hated sewing it on. When you washed it, a lot of times it wanted to pull off, or if people were using it, kids were around, they would pull it off. This pattern is all one piece. It's not going to pull off. This is sort of a hurdle stitch, but it's my version of the hurdle stitch. I don't do it quite the traditional way. Okay, that's it. I just wanted you to see the bind off and hope that helps you to make your bind offs easier. Thank you very much and have a great day.